What's going on? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and up next we are going to go over the top 10 surprising sales I saw this week. It's a little different this time because we had the Heritage Signature Auction, so I'm going to be going over the 10 biggest sales from that auction, and there are still some surprising high and low sales in there, so this will be an interesting one. I've also got an awesome giveaway for this month, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Alright, so before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. If you haven't watched one of these videos before, what I normally do is I watch the weekly Heritage Comic Auction, and I pick 5 books that surprised me on the high end, 5 books that surprised me on the low end to talk about kind of a variety of sales that happened that week. But this week was a special case. This is where we had the Heritage Signature or Platinum Auction, whatever you want to call it. This is where they have their big books that come up for sale. The really expensive stuff, usually we're on the low end, it's like $1,000, to the high end, it's hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. And there are some amazing books in these, always incredible to see these auctions. Even if you're not bidding, it's just fun to see these books come up for sale because a lot of them are either rare in grade, like really high grade silver and bronze books, or just rare books overall, really rare golden age books. This is when you start to see things like the Action ones, Superman ones, Tech 27s. These are the types of sales that you see those. But for this video, what I thought I'd do is I would go over the top 10 selling books from this auction. So these are the books that sold for the most, the top 10 books. Their total sales for just these 10 books was $2,749,200. So there's some incredible stuff in here. And there are some surprises on the high end, surprises on the low end. The interesting thing with these though is that some of these don't sell very often, so you're really taking a pretty big guess, kind of like an educated guess, but a big guess at what these are going to go for. I think it's still fun to look at these books and see why they may be sold for what they did. Now, before we get into that, for the giveaway, what I'm going to be giving away this month is X-Men number 9. Now, this is an incomplete copy. It is missing one page near the back. I don't know if it's a pinup or what, but so it is an incomplete copy, but still, it's X-Men number 9. This is an awesome book. It's this key issue where you've got the X-Men meeting the Avengers. It is a low-grade book, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's already missing a page, but it's got, writing and this kind of stuff on the cover. What happened with this one is that I had actually sold this book and maybe, 6 months ago or 8 months ago, and the book got returned to me. And I couldn't get a hold of the person that I sold it to. They just didn't respond to anything. So I waited a long time. And so it's reached, like I said, it's been 6 or 8 months. And so I decided I'd, be a cool book to do a giveaway on. So then at least somebody gets to enjoy, this book. So really cool, X-Men key, especially since I think at some point we're going to have a crossover of some type with the X-Men and the Avengers in the MCU. But so to get that, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with hashtag X-Men. I'll put that right here. So now that we've got the giveaway covered and kind of the intro to this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to a different view so that I can share the screen and we can take a look at some of these incredible books. All right, so we're going to start with number 10. And yes, the 10th most expensive book that sold in this auction was a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 1 CGC 9.8 first print for $156,000. This is how you get an idea how expensive the books really are in these signature or platinum auctions, because this would be a top tier book in just about any auction. And then this one is only number 10 on the list. This is from 1984. This is the first time you see the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, first time you see Shredder, first time you see Splinter. And there are multiple prints after this, but this is by far the most valuable one. Now, I had estimated the price of this book at $175,000. This was 11% below my estimate, but that's not the big issue with this one to me. The issue is that last year in September, so a little over a year ago, this had peaked with a sale of $245,000. This book was going for almost $250,000. And there may have been a sale that didn't get pulled in here where it actually broke that $250,000 mark, since Comic Link sales don't get pulled into GPA, which is where I look at most of this data. But wow, I mean, from that last public recorded sale, this is a drop of 36%. That is a significant drop for this book. Now, this is a rare book from the perspective of more modern books. This is 1984, kind of right on the edge of that copper and bronze range. I tend to refer to this one as the book that started the copper age. It's just such a significant book from that time period. But this one only had a print run of 3,000 copies. Total graded on census are 1,145. So a significant percentage of those books are graded. There are 946 universal copies and just 34 in a 9.8. So it is a rare book in grade. But you also have to think about how many people out there have the money and are willing to spend the money on a book of this level, this much money on this book, because there's a lot of other options out there. I mean, it is an incredible book. I think this is awesome. I would love to own a first print at some point, but man, when you're getting up in those $100,000-$200,000 areas, you have a lot of competition. But regardless, this is by far the most expensive Copper Age book that is out there. And so this was an incredible one to see. I always love seeing this first print come up for sale. Now, one thing just to kind of help out a little bit. So if we zoom in on this one, the way that you can tell, so the first and the second prints look identical on the front cover. You cannot tell from the front cover. You have to go on the interior to see. But the way that you can tell the difference between a first and a third print, first and second and a third print, is that right where I am here, there's another little blood splatter in the T right here. That's how you know it's a third print. So just something to keep an eye out for. That's how you can really tell the difference between those printings. All right, so let's move on to number 9. My buddy Newbie over at Newbie Comics, he'll love to see this one in the top 10. This is Tales of Suspense, number 39. This is the first appearance of Iron Man. Incredible Silver Age, major Grail level book. This was a 9.2 that sold for a record $168,000. So no, not every book is going down. There are books that still hit records, books that still beat my estimates. And this is one of them. It's from 1963. I had estimated the price of this book at $120,000. This was 40% above my estimate. This was a very strong sale. And I know there are people out there that like to think that, it has to have the double quotes, to be that super expensive book. That is not true at all. Most people really don't care. And so what I'm talking about there is that you have these quotes here, and then you don't have the quotes over here. And it's just about the wrap. It's about where the wrap is positioned. The other thing people often talk about is this little strip of blue under the table here that's often cut off. But if that's not cut off, then you have part of the comics code up here cut off. I mean, it's all relative. But man, just a 9.2, an incredible copy of this book. Now, the prior record was 144,000 in September of last year. That's an increase of 17% over that prior record. And honestly, the reason this was such a surprising sale to me was that this book has really been going down in pretty much every other grade. Even a 5.0 recently sold for just over 10,000 at 10,200, and that had peaked at over 20,000 in March of this year. So to see this one hit that new record, I think that's real significant, because it's not just that higher grade books constantly go up. I mean, we've talked about this with Fantastic Four #1 that's had big drops in some grades. Amazing Fantasy 15 has had big drops in high grades. And so high grade doesn't guarantee that the book is always going to go up. In this case, it did though. Incredible sale. Now this one, there are 2,600 copies on the census. 1,937 of them are universal and 17 in a 9.2. Just 26 copies graded higher. So this one is in about the top 2% of copies that are out there. Just an incredible copy of the first appearance of Iron Man, and just amazing colors on this one. I've always really liked the blues on these copies. So yeah, we can take a look at the back cover too. So there's the back cover, front cover, just amazing copy of this one. All right, so next we've got number 8, and this one was, to me, was a very low sale. This was a big underperformer. This is Fantastic Four number 49 with a CGC 9.8 that sold for a record $192,000. So if this was a record, this is a almost $200,000 sale. why was this an underperformer in my eyes? And so the reason is I had estimated that this book would sell for around $375,000. This was 49% below my estimate. So to me, just a huge underperformer with this book. But why did I think that it was going to sell for that? Why did I think this was a big underperformer? Well, let's get into that. So the last time that this book sold was in November of 2016, sold for $47,600. Now that is an increase of 303% from the prior record. That's obviously a big jump for 6 years. But if we look at other grades, other high grade copies of this book, a 9.2 in that same time period, 6 years ago, it was going for around $1,200. It is now a $15,600 book this year. That's a jump of 1,200%. A 9.0 went from $700 to $7,800. That's 1,014%. The 7.0 went from $225 to $2,300, a jump of 922%. So you can see that trend there. This book, in all these other grades, has gone up around 1,000% in the last 6 years versus just 300% for this one. So to me, this was a big underperformer for this book. It just shows that those higher grade books are not always the better investments. They aren't always the better long-term performers. They have big numbers that sound very impressive. 192,000 sounds very impressive. But if you had, say, been able to purchase like 30 copies in a 9.2, which you probably couldn't, but say you could purchase 30 copies in a 9.2, you would now have significantly more money than this one copy in a 9.8. And so that's what I'm talking about here, where it's not always that the high grade copy is the better performer in terms of percentage. But yeah, the big numbers always sound impressive, so they get a lot of coverage, but to me, this is a big underperformer. Now, the reason I didn't estimate 1,000%, around $450,000 is that I thought something like this might happen. I thought that there might be a little bit of an underperformance just because when you get up into these numbers, again, you have lots of competition. There's lots of other amazing things that you can buy with around $500,000. So that's why I estimated 375, but then it even underperformed below that. Now, the census for this book, there are 5,349 on census with 4,744 as universal copies, just 2 in a 9.8. This is an extremely rare book in high grade. When you compare that to like Fantastic Four 48, that one actually has significantly more copies in that 9.8. We can actually show that real quick. So if we go to Fantastic Four number 48, and we take a look at the census for this book. And we take a look at the census for this book. So we'll go over to the CGC census. You can see for issue 48, 40 copies in a 9.8. There was actually a warehouse find of issue 48. I don't know when, a while ago, maybe 20 years ago. And so there are tons of high grade copies of this book. You see 40 in a 9.8, 99 in a 9.6, 129 in a 9.4. Let's compare that to 49. So for 49, if you go to the census, you see 2 in a 9.8, 14 in a 9.6, 30 in a 9.4, 50 in a 9.2, 165 in a 9.2. I mean, there's so many less copies. And that's why in lower grades, just because 48 is that first appearance of Silver Surfer, first cameo of Galactus, it sells for more. But when you get into high grade, you start to get that changeover in price where 49 starts selling for more because it's just so much more rare in grade. So you get a big premium for that rarity. Now, let's also compare that to Marvel Spotlight 5 and why I felt like, again, this was a low sale. There are 4 copies of Marvel Spotlight 5, first Ghost Rider in a 9.8, and it sold for $264,000 last year with that 9.8. Almost the same total census as well. And so, yeah, I mean, I felt like this was an underperformer in my opinion. And I know some people will point out, oh, it's off white to white pages and the other 9.8 is white pages. I don't care. There are 2 of them. This is that case where, yeah, the white pages one would probably sell for a little bit of a premium, but not something like this. All right, now for number 7. This is an incredible book. Again, another one that I felt really underperformed, but I think it might have a reason why, at least a little bit of a reason why. So this is Marvel Comics number 1. If you're not familiar with this book, let's take a close look here. First appearance of Human Torch, Khazar, Angel, Jungle Terror, and Masked Raider. Origin of Submariner, first timely. So Submariner appeared in something different prior to this, but this is a very early appearance of Submariner. But yeah, just an incredible book. This is one of those big, major golden age keys. This is up on the same level with Action Comics 1, Detective Comics 27, Wiz Comics number 1, kind of, sort of. But yeah, one of the major golden age keys, 1939. And I had actually estimated the price of this book at $325,000. This was 31% below my estimate. Yeah, I felt this was a weak one. And now it was a record. It had the prior record in 2016 of 77,675. That is an increase of 187% from that prior sale 6 years ago. Again, not that great of a gain. When I was just talking about the Fantastic Four 48, same time period, that one, even though it was kind of an underperformer, increased over 300%. So really not a super impressive gain for this book. But the reason I felt like this was an underperformer was that a 2.5 sold for $363,000 in March of this year. Now a 4.5 sold for $360,000 in January of this year as well. But still, regardless, I felt like this book easily should have been over that $300,000 mark. Now, it's a pretty rare book. There are only 66 copies on census, 34 universal copies. There are 3 in a 3.0 and 20 graded higher. There are some really beautiful copies of this book out there. Now, one of the reasons I think maybe this one went low is that I kind of feel like this book was overgraded a little bit. And I think maybe some other people felt that too. And the reason is, let's take a look at the grader's notes for this one. So you can see it's a detached cover. With a detached cover, generally the highest grade you're going to get is a 3.0. There'd be some exceptions somewhere, but generally the highest is a 3.0. Then there's multiple spine splits. So the 3.0 is usually going to be like a very clean looking book, but it has a detached cover. This is one where, let's jump back here. Yeah, I mean, it's clean in this area, the main image, but you can tell there is a lot of splitting and fraying to this spine. I mean, look at this. Major splits, major splits, major splits. My Detective Comics 168, the one that I picked up, it was a Promise Collection pedigree. That one is a detached cover and just has a split down here. This one has more splitting, and mine got a 1.8. This book got a 3.0. And so I kind of feel like this book is pretty overgraded, and I think probably the people bidding felt that way too, that maybe it should have been closer to a 2.0, something down in that range. Because I can show you that copy real quick. So Detective Comics 168, which is the first appearance of the Red Hood. So 1.8. This is that copy. And you can see here, this book honestly presents as good or better than that Marvel Comics number 1. And this one, the splitting is just this piece here. It's right down here. And it got a 1.8. And no, there isn't anything going on the back cover. Back cover is incredible as well. So I kind of feel like that Marvel Comics number 1 got overgraded. I can't say for sure, but it feels overgraded to me. And I think that other people may have felt the same way, and that could be why it ended up getting that lower number. But that's my speculation on it as to why this one ended up with a lower grade. But all right, let's move on to number 6. This was also a low sale to me. This is Fantastic Four number 1 in a 9.0. This one from 1961, obviously first appearance of the Fantastic Four, incredible book, major Silver Age key, probably number 3 on the list, behind Amazing Fantasy 15 and probably Showcase 4. But this one was a 9.0, sold for $234,000, I had estimated this book would sell for 260,000. This was 10% below my estimate. The record was actually 420,000 from June of this year. That is a drop of almost $200,000 in 5 months, about 5 months. So a drop of 44%. Now that 9.0 was definitely brighter. It was a nicer looking copy. We can jump to that book. So you can see that, yes, it is a nicer looking copy, but this book has generally been decreasing across the board. It has been coming down. I think it got a little too far ahead of itself, but let's look at that $420,000 sale from June. So here's that 9.0. It's a white pages copy. It is a brighter copy. You know, if we jump back and forth, you see this one has a lot more of that dinginess to it. This one is definitely a brighter copy of that book. It deserves to sell for more than this one, but I don't think it deserves to sell for $186,000 more than this one. So that one definitely felt like a poor performer to me. But this one, it's relatively uncommon for a Silver Age, one of these Silver Age mega keys. There's 2,772 on census with 1,888 as universal copies, 11 in a 9.0, and only 8 graded higher. This one is very uncommon in these high grades. The highest is actually a 9.6. There are no 9.8s. There are 2 at a 9.6. But yeah, just it is an incredible book, but this one has definitely been trending down. It got a little too far ahead of itself like some other books have earlier this year. All right, now number 5. This is an awesome one. I love seeing this book come up for sale. This is Captain America, number 1. Got Captain America on the cover, first appearance, punching Hitler in the face. This one has some other benefits to it as well. This one is a Larson pedigree. It's one of these CGC pedigrees. I don't know if this one actually says Larson on the cover. Usually they say Larson on the cover. That's how you can often identify it. Yeah, I don't. Maybe somebody sees it and I don't, and I'm just missing it, but I don't see Larson on the cover. Not on the back either. Yeah, but so like a Larson pedigree often has the name Larson written on the cover, Larson, right there. But this is 1941. This is a conserved book, though. You can see it does not have a blue label. It has this gray strip at the top. I'm not a huge fan of those gray strips. I think that they often can confuse people, and people might think it's a blue label because the background is still the same. The only difference is this little here, because it is a restored book. The conserved grades fall into the restored category. It's just a very specific type of restoration. In this case, cover was cleaned, cover was reinforced, and the staples were replaced. Now, I had estimated the price of this book at $200,000. Granted, this one is almost impossible to estimate. I was really taking a shot in the dark with this one. It was 38% above my estimate. I just felt this was a strong sale. I think maybe I underestimated the impact of that Larson pedigree. Those pedigrees definitely add a premium to these books, especially the bigger the key is. It often is a bigger premium for that book. Now, there is no prior reference for this book for sale. There's no prior sale of this book. There's no prior sale of a 9.2 conserved, anything like that. So just kind of had to pick one out. A 9.4 universal did sell for $3.12 million earlier this year. So it kind of gives you an idea about the difference. I would guess a 9.2 universal would probably sell for around $1.5 million. So this is about 1/6 of that price, which honestly, it feels a little high to me. I do feel like that's a little high, but I mean, it's so rare. What are you going to do? It's like there's going to be people that want this book, and it's just such a beautiful copy. Now, the current census for this one, there are 186 copies out there. 91 are universal. 86 are restored. Like I said, conserved falls into restored. There are 3 restored copies in a 9.2 and 1 graded higher. So yeah, with restoration, you always have to generally think as the book goes up in grade, the restoration has more of an impact on the value. The lower grade books, a restored copy might sell for almost the same as a universal, but in the higher grades, it's just, it starts to separate out much more significantly. But yeah, still really solid sale for this book, $276,000. It's a record, obviously, because there was no prior sale. But all right, let's move on to number 4. I love seeing these books too, because you just don't see them sell very often. This is Superman number 1, incredible book. sold for a record $288,000 for a 1.8, probably one of the best 1.8s you will ever see. This is from 1939. This is the book that earlier this year had an 8.0 sell for $5.3 million. I believe that is still the top price paid ever for a comic. Now, if the high grade Action ones ever came up for sale, those would definitely top that. But this is currently that 8.0, I believe, is still currently the top price ever paid for a comic. Now, the reason this book is a 1.8, the reason that this stunning copy, because there's nothing wrong with the back either. I mean, back looks incredible too, is a 1.8, is that this one has a split spine. So we can go check out the grader's notes. You can see there's all this little stuff here. None of this really matters. Back of cover, light erasure marks, tear with crease, light multiple stain. That doesn't really matter for this grade. This one, the limiting flaw is this: spine completely split. 1.8 is about the highest you are ever going to get with a completely split spine. Unless you send a CBCS. I have seen 3 O's from CBCS with a complete split spine, but you will not get that from CGC. I guarantee it. That's one of the areas where you'll have a little bit of a difference between CGC and CBCS grading is those split spines. Sometimes CBCS gives some much higher grades than you would normally expect. But yeah, incredible book. I'd estimated the price at $250,000. This was 15% above my estimate. And even though Superman isn't as popular now as a lot of these other characters like Batman, that kind of thing, when you're talking about Superman #1, Action #1, those Superman key issues, they still are very strong books. Now, the prior record from 2018 was $132,000, so up 118% in 4 years. A substantial gain for a book at this price point. But again, you can see a lot of other books that would be less expensive would have gone up significantly more than that in that same 4-year period. So just something to always think about when you're talking about these big books, because yeah, the numbers are always extremely impressive. 288,000 is an extremely impressive number, but in terms of percent return, it's not really there when you're comparing it to, I would say, lesser golden age or lesser silver age keys. Now, this is a pretty rare book as well. 168 on census, just 71 universal copies, 3 and a 1.8, and only 37 graded higher. That shows you how uncommon this book is above even low grades. I mean, you've got 34 of those 71 that are at a 1.8 or lower. The highest grade is only an 8.5. And so that's why this book is very, very difficult to come by in those high grades, even mid grades. All right, now we're moving to the top 3. This is number 3, and I actually just talked about this book a few minutes ago. This was Detective Comics number 168, a 9.4, first appearance of the Red Hood, White Pages, highest graded copy on the census. It's $324,000, and a record because this book has never come up for sale before in this grade. It has never come up for sale. It's the single highest graded copy, and this copy hasn't ever been up for sale. Now, I had estimated the price of this book at $200,000. I thought it would go somewhere between 150 and 200. So 200 on the high end was my estimate. This was 62% above my estimate. An extremely strong sale, in my opinion, for this book. Obviously, it's tough to predict where those top of census books are going to go, because that's something that someone can just claim to have. They're like, I have the best copy in existence of, or best known copy in existence of this book. And so that will really drive bidding for these types of books. But still, this felt like a very strong sale. $324,000. If you're not familiar with this, like I said, first appearance of the Red Hood, but the Red Hood is the Joker in this case. So this is also the first origin story for the Joker. So it's a pretty key issue and just an incredible cover. I really do like this cover. Now, the prior record sale for this book was a 7.5 that sold in 2020 for $34,800. This book rarely sells in these high grades. There were 2 other copies in this auction as well. A 7.0 went for $33,600, which I felt was a pretty decent price for that book. A 3.0 went for $8,400, which was a disappointing price. But honestly, that one felt like it had the same issue as that Marvel Mystery #1. So we can actually jump to that one real quick. 960. So you can see here, this is that Detective Comics number 168, detached cover. You've got some pieces out of the spine. Front cover looks pretty decent. Back cover's got pieces missing, pieces missing. You know, there is definitely a little bit of splitting on this book. And so I think this one, people probably felt that this book was overgraded a bit too, and it's why it got hit that. Actually, it's making me wonder if I should resubmit my promise book, see if maybe I should, like, I feel like I should have gotten like a 2 or a 2.5 or something based on what I've seen with these other ones. The 1.8 seems like it's pretty harsh based on this Marvel mystery that I've seen here and this Detective Comics. So, but yeah, I think a lot of people maybe felt this one was a little overgraded as well, which is probably why that one went a little lower than what was probably expected. Now, back to this 9.4. There are 177 copies on census, 139 are universal, and just one in that 9.4, none graded higher. So, yeah, just an incredible book. Now, I'm not a huge fan of this green D that's written up here on this. I actually kind of like the look of the 7.0 a little bit more, but still, awesome book. You can't take really anything away from a 9.4 white pages copy. But all right, let's move on to the number 2 high sale. This is actually a low one, in my opinion. This was Amazing Spider-Man number 1 in a 9.6. It did sell for a record, sold for $336,000, but felt low to me. Now, this is not the highest graded copy. There are 2 9.8 copies of this book. I had estimated that this one would sell for $400,000. This is 16% below that estimate. The prior record was $262,900 back in 2016, but that was a pedigree copy. So, like I said, sometimes those pedigrees will go for a premium. But regardless, that's an increase of 28% in 6 years. That is not very impressive. With everything that we've seen, with what other books have done, 28% for 9.6 in 6 years is not an impressive jump. A non-pedigree 9.6 hasn't sold since 2005. That one sold for $97,750. That's an increase of 240% in 17 years. If you're talking about an annual return on, like a normal investment, what you might get in the stock market, that's about what you'd get probably in the stock market. But for what we've seen with a lot of these key books for 17 years, that is not an impressive return. Again, yeah, big numbers, but not an impressive percentage return, in my opinion. Now, this one is a pretty common book in terms of Silver Age, big Silver Age keys. There are 4,563 on census with 3,198 universal copies. There are 4 in a 9.6, 2 graded higher in a 9.8. All right, now let's go to the biggest sale. Now, I did not put the Calvin and Hobbes original art in this one. This is just comics, but there was a Calvin and Hobbes original art piece that there was a Sunday Funny, an early Sunday Funny that sold for $480,000. That would have fallen right between this and the top sale. Top sale, again, was a low one to me. It's just this book just keeps trending down. This is Amazing Fantasy number 15. Everybody knows this book. First appearance of Spider-Man. This is a CGC 8.5 that sold for $552,000. I had estimated the price of this book at $700,000 because it has been trending down. This was still 21% below my estimate. This really is a beautiful copy. Great colors, no chipping or anything on this copy. Just a really nice copy of this book. The record. This is where it gets rough, though. The record from July of this year, just 4 months ago, was $875,000. That is a drop of 37% in 4 months. That, I mean, even if you can afford that book, that's a tough pill to swallow, I'm sure, seeing, a $325,000 loss in value over 4 months. Now, there was also a $707,000 sale in September of last year. So it's even down 22% from that. I mean, this is down a lot from those peaks. But I do think it is important to put this in perspective. In 2017, just 5 years ago, this book was selling for $155,000. That's a jump of 255% in 5 years. That is not bad at all, especially for a major book like this. So it is well above from where it was selling 4 or 5 years ago, but definitely down from the peaks of earlier this year and last year. Now, again, this is a pretty common book, and I think that's one of the things that has really hurt the value on it is that when the prices jumped as much as they did, people that had them just decided, hey, I bought this 5 years ago for a quarter or a fifth of the price, I'll sell it and I'll cash in on this book. And so there are 3,688 total copies on census, 2,387 universal copies. Now, when you're getting to these high grades, there's only 13 in an 8.5 and only 26 graded higher. There are 4 9.6s, no 9.8s. So there are no 9.8s or known 9.8s in existence. But yeah, still an incredible copy of this book. So the question is, are the drops done for this one? Probably not. I could see Amazing Fantasy 15 continuing to drop further, but I don't think it has too much more to go. I think it has corrected quite a bit, but you never know until it happens. It does seem like it is largely back in the trend line for a lot of books. I've talked about that a little bit before, and so let's take a look. What some other books, where they're sitting right now with respect to their historical sales. Now, high grades like this don't sell very often. So, you know, you kind of got to take that for what it is. But if we go to something like let's see here, maybe like a 3.5, something that sells a little more regularly. So you can see this general trend line for this book. If you carry that through, you know, maybe we're about here. The low sale was 26,400. Before the boom, this book was going for around 16 to 17,000. And there's a couple of years in there. So you could see some increase there. I mean, does a 3.5 get down to mid 20s? I don't know if it's going to go that low, but there's the possibility that it could. It was selling there, you know, not that long ago. I mean, you had in 20 and 19, you had low sales in the, 16,000, 17,000, highs in the in the low 20s. So could it be that it gets to low sales around the 20s and highs around the 28s? That is very possible. So just something to always consider with these ones. That's definitely what I'm watching with a lot of these books, is where they are with respect to what they've done historically and kind of ignoring what happened in the comic boom. But yeah, just something to consider if you are looking at some of these major Grail level books. Now, some books have come down to those trend lines already. Others haven't, but I mean, this is the first appearance of Spider-Man. He is the most popular character of all time from comics. And so not ever something that I'd be overly concerned about investing in. I could see this book continuing to climb for years and years to come, but it did get a little overheated for a while, and so I'm not surprised to see it coming back down again. All right, so I hope you enjoyed that video, saw some awesome books. I really do enjoy it when these signature auctions come up, because you just see some incredibly rare stuff, and it's just always fun to see those books, see what they go for, what the interest is in them, all of that. So if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. Remember, leave a comment with hashtag X-Men to have a chance to pick up this book. If you'd like to see more videos, I got more videos over here. The subscription button should be right around here, and I will see you in the next video.